A sound you most likely haven't heard in a very long time. Ever wonder why? Friday the 13th is easily one of the most iconic horror franchises of all time, but for some reason, it just doesn't feel like that's a fact. So many other iconic horror movies of the past have still held their ground in current day media. Compared to this, Friday the 13th just doesn't hold its ground very well. Don't get me wrong, the fanbase is still very, very active, and every now and again Jason Voorhees will appear in some form of media, but you have to admit, 16 years without a film? That is not a good example of a thriving franchise. Now, despite me being rather young, I still do remember a time where this series was getting increasingly popular. I remember when everybody was just anticipating the release of a new film. I remember Friday the 13th, the game. This title was released on May 26th, 2017. Developed by Ilphonic and published by Gun Media. It had a Kickstarter page that raised over $800,000 in order for it to be made. And apparently, there was a lot more where that came from. That is a ton of money to be putting towards a project, but thankfully, its return was quite nice upon release. It was off to a shaky start in some areas, but regardless, to say that this game was successful would be an understatement. Within the first few months, this game sold 1.8 million copies. A huge success, in case you were wondering. It got so popular to the point where if people just recorded themselves playing it with a few friends, they would be granted millions upon millions of views for it. The inherent jankiness of the game and the open mic mechanic made for some very ridiculous and memorable moments. Have you ever wanted to play Dead by Daylight, but by the end of the match you didn't want to rip off your fucking fingers? Well, here you have it. That's pretty much what this game was. In the public matches where one player was Jason Voorhees and the rest were camp counselors trying to survive, there was a ton of stuff that you could do in this game. Hell, if you played your cards correctly in a public match, you could kill Jason Voorhees. Do you have even the slightest clue how fucking badass that is? Anyways, back to the point of the video. With this game being out there, it skyrocketed the popularity of Jason Voorhees. So much so that if things had gone smoothly, a new film would have absolutely been in store. But something odd happened. Only 1 year after this game was released, the publisher announced that any future updates and DLCs were cancelled. Fast forward to today, and not only has the game been removed from online marketplaces and physical stores, but has also officially shut down all of their online servers. So you might be asking yourself, what caused this game to go from such a well-known title to something that is now merely a shell of its former self? Well, I must warn you, this story is complicated, irritating, and tragic. It ripples past just the game and dives headfirst into the entire IP of Friday the 13th. But before we get into that, I want to say a little something. Recently, we hit 70,000 subscribers. That is awesome. Knowing that that many people support me and my content is heartwarming, to say the least. You want to know what's not heartwarming though? Apparently only 7.1% of the people who watch my videos are subscribed. I want to see that percentage get bumped up to double digits. And the only person that can expedite that change is you. So if you do enjoy this video and you enjoy my content in general and you're not already subscribed, give it a thought and maybe we can hit 100K by the end of the year. Regardless, thank you all so much for the opportunity. And for what it's worth, I really hope you enjoy this video. If we want to address how this game had such a sharp decline, we have to go back in time. All the way back to the late 70s. Trust me, this all starts to make sense in about 10 minutes. In the late 70s, after the hit slasher film Halloween was released, a man by the name of Sean Cunningham decided he wanted to see if he could test his luck on making a film in a similar style. But the only problem was that Cunningham didn't have much in mind for what the film would actually be. Well, he had a name for the film, and he knew it was going to be a slasher film, but not many ideas for the story. Regardless, he said, fuck it, and immediately started advertising it as the, and I quote, most terrifying film ever made. The guy didn't even have a script. Miraculously, he got funding because of this advertisement. $500,000. Go make your film. Money aside, it still did not change the fact that he did not really know what the story was going to be. So he turned to a writer to help him with this film. A writer by the name of Victor Miller. Miller's writing and Cunningham's directing led Friday the 13th to be a hit in the box office, making $5 million in the opening weekend, finishing domestically with almost $40 million in returns. It was a success. Cunningham decided that he wanted to keep this train going. He wanted sequels to be made, but there was one interesting factor. Cunningham did not rehire Miller to write the second film. In fact, he did not rehire Miller for any of the other Friday the 13th movies, and a lot of the money that these sequels were generating were not going into the pockets of the man who built the foundation to this franchise. It really does not help that Miller himself states on his official website that he does not even like the sequels. Miller most likely felt very cheated about the situation, but there was not much he could do at the time. But eventually he did do something. There is this silly, wacky right that we have called a copyright termination right. It states that, these are not my words, I'm quoting something. Section 203 of the Copyright Act permits authors to terminate grants of copyright assignments and licenses that were made on or after January 1st of 1978, when certain conditions have been met. Termination of a grant cannot be effective until 35 years after the execution of the grant, or if the grant covers the right of publication, no earlier than 40 years after the execution of the grant, or 35 years after publication under the grant, whichever comes first. Grants may only be terminated during a specific statutory window, and must specify the date that the termination goes into effect. The effective date must fall within a 5-year termination period, which is based on factors set forth in sections 203, 304C, or 304D, as applicable. Let me try and reform that into something a bit more understandable. Let's say you make a story, and you sold the rights to somebody else or even a company. With the right to copyright termination, you have the ability to get that copyright back through legal proceedings. But you must wait 35 years after signing it away. After waiting those 35 years, you only have a 5-year window to go through with this, and that is exactly what Victor Miller did. He wrote the screenplay in 1979, and Miller began issuing termination notices in 2016, 37 years later. He exercised his right by claiming that technically, since he was the writer for the first Friday the 13th, that he is the copyright holder of the first film. He was met with a bit of pushback. The case was titled Horror Inc. v. Miller. Horror Inc. being the main copyright holder of the Friday the 13th franchise. In case you were wondering, Sean Cunningham is associated with this company. Now, whenever Miller started giving out termination notices, the opposing party wanted a declaratory judgment. It was implied that the script was a work for hire, that Victor Miller was an employee when he wrote the film, which would add some complications to his claim. However, Miller asserted a counterclaim saying that his lawsuit was valid because he was not an employee, but rather an independent contractor when he wrote that script. Now, interestingly enough, this case almost and could have ended a lot sooner. You see, the good news about the counterclaim was that the district court did back up Miller. On the parties' cross motions for summary judgment, the district court ruled that the Friday the 13th screenplay was not a work made for hire, and that Miller's termination notice validly terminated Horror's rights to the copyright in the screenplay. But after this ruling, Horror Inc. appealed to the Second Circuit, and for many more years this battle was still underway. Now, is there a good guy and bad guy in this situation? That's for you to decide. Honestly, it is just a very messy, complicated situation for everyone involved. Anyways, a bit more back and forth happened, but nothing really too noteworthy. It was mainly just a huge breakdown of technicalities. That was until mid-2021, where the case finally ended. The Second Circuit upheld the district court's decision, so Victor Miller won his case. Now he owns the rights to the first film of Friday Friday the 13th inside the United States. So, it's over. The game should have made a full return, right? We'll get to that in a second. Here's where I get very confused. Victor Miller owns the rights to the screenplay and the movie of the original Friday the 13th film. Yes? So that would mean Victor Miller owns Pamela Voorhees, all of the characters in the first film, and child Jason Voorhees. Since all of these things were established in the first film, he owns all of them. So if Victor Miller wanted to make a Friday the 13th movie, show, short series, it could only be a prequel, pretty much, with Pamela Voorhees, Camp Crystal Lake, and her son Jason. On the opposite side, Cunningham, if he wanted to make a new Friday the 13th film, he couldn't use the fucking backstory of Jason Voorhees. He couldn't mention anything from the first movie. Not even the legend of him drowning at Camp Crystal Lake. Mind you, this is not even taking into account the distribution companies that own certain trademarks regarding the franchise. So how would this work? Trick question. It doesn't. Which makes me believe that I'm mistaken about something, but I can't be. This is the only thing that makes sense given the circumstances. Regardless, the main point should be that if they want to make anything new regarding this franchise, they need to make some sort of deal or agreement. And if they're unable to put aside their differences, anything new regarding Friday the 13th will be very complicated, especially games. Speaking of which, let's make our way over to that discussion. Now, when all of this legal stuff was underway, what happened to the game? Well, there's no easy way to put it. There's not. The game of Friday the 13th was caught in the crossfire in a horrendous fashion. As I mentioned earlier, 1 year after the release, on June 11th, 2018, Gun Media announced that they had canceled any future updates for the game. They were not allowed to do anything new for the game until the legal battle was done, and there would be no way of knowing when exactly it would end. If they did try to push through it and make something, they would be enduring a serious risk of trying to make a new DLC or maybe even a new update and then not being allowed to release it because of the lawsuit, which would be a huge waste of both time and money. Now granted, most everybody thought this bullshit would have only gone on for about like a month or two at most, but hell no. After this announcement, IllFonic backed away from being the developer of this game. A team named Black Tower Studios was given the role as the development partner of the game. These guys were pretty much hired for damage control on the game's coding. Black Tower had previously worked on certain maps in the game that players greatly enjoyed, but they were given this role when there was no new stuff being added, so it was rather uneventful. From this point on, nothing really changed. The lawsuit was still going really strong, and the developers had their hands tied when it came to making new content, which is a point that people tend to miss out on. The dev team is not entirely to blame. I know there's like conspiracies and rumors that Gun Media and IllFonic were just kind of using the lawsuit as a crutch to just abandon the game. I'm not gonna lie to you, considering recent events, that very well could have been the case. But at the very least, you cannot deny that this game had passion put into it. I mean, they got Kane Hodder, who portrayed Jason Voorhees in several films, to mocap the animations of Jason Voorhees in the game. That's awesome. Other things too, like Tommy Jarvis in the game is voiced by his on-screen actor Tom Matthews. Same goes for Shelly, who is voiced by Larry Zerner, his in-movie actor as well. Alongside this, the settings, the music, the types of characters, you can tell the developers were studying the movies in order for this game to be made. With all that taken into account, I just highly doubt that the developers wanted to leave this game behind. Then again, I could be giving them too much of the benefit of the doubt, but who fucking knows? As time went on the development side of things, it made sense that the companies responsible for the game could not afford to just sit around waiting for one project to complete a legal battle. They had to move away from this game and go on to newer releases. 2 years later, the game's official servers were shut down sometime in late 2020. However, you could still play on peer-to-peer matchmaking. As I said before, 2021 was the year the lawsuit officially ended, but the unfortunate thing is that even after the legal stuff was done, the game was never picked back up in any significant way. The only thing I can recall they did was that they dropped the prices of all the previously added DLC content. In 2023, the license for the Friday the 13th game expired, causing it to be pulled from online markets and physical shelves. The online servers remained functioning for about a year after, but unfortunately, at the time of making this video, just 4 months ago, they all officially shut down for good. Anybody that still owns the game is resorted to either playing the offline mode or doing something rather sneaky, trying to play the game with a functioning server. But all things considered, compared to how it was in the earlier days, this game is dead, with no signs of it being resurrected. It's such a damn disappointment. I mean, yeah, I say that, but I could not imagine the rage the Kickstarter backers had after hearing all this. Think about it, they raised almost $1 million for this game, for only half of the shit that was planned to actually be made. Because mind you, this game had so much more in the works. For example, around 2018, there were confirmations that this game would add a Jason X themed map and Jason Voorhees to the game, but due to the circumstances, it was halted and unfortunately never released. Well, except for that offline mode cabin thing, but that doesn't really count. I also have a feeling that they were going to add every single version of Jason Voorhees, like the one from the 2009 reboot or the one from Freddy vs. Jason. That would have been really cool to see. When everything began shutting down or becoming stagnant, people tried their hand at modding the game, but Horror Inc. is super against any mods of this game, and have been shown to cease and desist towards anyone doing so, which, I mean, yeah, it's their legal right to do so. It is their IP after all, that they're doing fucking nothing with. You would think that since they're going through the trouble of ceasing and desisting passionate fans, that maybe something monumental is in the works. Which brings me to my final point of this video. What is now in store for Friday the 13th? Well, it looks like something is in the works, but I don't know. Jason Universe was announced last year, which is labeled as a multi-platform expansion that will include entertainment, games, merchandise, and immersive experiences. But the only thing to really come out of this is Jason Voorhees being in multiverses. Oh wait, I almost forgot. Some t-shirts too. These shirts look like hot fucking garbage. But something interesting that I actually care about did come out of this. IGN put this little quote from a president of Horror Inc. The quote reads, "For decades, Jason shocked and thrilled audiences who kept coming back for more. We're excited to work with Victor Miller and Mark Toberoff on new projects we'll announce in the coming months." So there we have it. Horror Inc. and Victor Miller have put aside their differences and worked together. That's great news. I guess we'll have to see what they do. In the meantime, I'll be on the lookout to see if anything new or fascinating arises from the ashes that is this franchise. If you want to leave this video with a little bit of positivity, I will let you know that there are plans to make a prequel series called Crystal Lake. It was announced back in late 2022 and has since kind of been in a state of limbo. Although recently it does look like it has been picked back up. So here's to hoping that it eventually gets made. Hello, it's me, Wazerbite. This is the day before I want this video to go out, so I'm being a little bit hasteful, but mind me. The 45th year anniversary of Friday the 13th was a week ago. Jason Universe announced two things. One, they have a new logo, which is pretty much just a more beat up version of the original logo, but the second announcement blows the first one out of the water. At the time of me writing this down, it came out 6 hours ago. Jason Universe announced that this is the new redesign of Jason Voorhees. Any future media regarding the man himself will feature him looking like this. While yes, he does look a lot like his previous design in the 2009 film, I still think he looks alright. I know people on Twitter really fucking hate this design, but it's not that bad. I've seen worse. But yeah, that's all I really need to say. No further updates as of right now, but personally, I would keep my eyes peeled because this kind of stuff can come out of nowhere. Thank you all for making it this far and watching through this video. I hope I was able to make sense of this unfortunate circumstance and perhaps give closure to fans of the game. Be sure to subscribe and leave a like to show support to my channel. If I missed something regarding the legal issues or the copyright documents, please let me know and feel free to correct me. I mean, most of my sources come from official law firms that did summaries of the case, so I don't think I said anything incorrect, but I definitely could have missed something. And if you have more keen eyes, be sure to let me know. Anyways, it's been me, Wazerbyte, and I will see all of you in the next video.